Hey guys, welcome to the Blender tutorial for Jedi Academy. What we're going to be doing with this, for this first video, is basically just going through the setup for Blender, how to get it looking ready for your porting, Frankensteining, whatever you're doing with Jedi Academy. And then further on down the line we'll be looking into actually doing the whole modelling work that comes with Jedi Academy by using Blender. There's a couple of useful tools that you can see in the description, such as ModView and Blender itself, as well as the link to import the Jedi Academy models into Blender and export them out of it. And I'll also go through how to set up the folders for Jedi Academy, so you can easily access everything that you need to. So first of all, whenever you load up Blender, you'll see a screen like this. This is just the pop-up that you see every time. You can just close that off with a simple left click, and then you'll be greeted with this every time. What this is just a default thing that comes with Blender every time. I don't know why. I guess it's to just show you some basics of Blender. Now, unlike most other tools, Blender requires you to use some different keys. For example, you probably expect to hold left click and drag to rotate, but you don't do that with Blender for whatever reason. Instead, it's clicking the middle mouse button or the scroll wheel in, and that lets you rotate around. Same for scrolling in and out to zoom. That's how you'd normally rotate around a model in Blender. There's a couple of other stuff that you can do. You can hold shift and then the middle mouse click. That lets you pan the camera around, and left click selects objects like this, and it also lets you move the object around if you don't want to use these standard things here, the axes. Now you'll notice I've got a program called Keepers running, so anything that I do on screen that you don't see, it should show up there. For example, any hotkeys, because Blender requires you to use hotkeys quite a lot, so that's the only reason I've got that up. So there's some of the basics on moving the camera around and setting it up. Oh, another thing before we move on, you've got a kind of perspective thing up here. This is user perspective that's currently active, so it looks more 3D as you're looking at the models. When I do modelling, I usually use orthodontic view instead, because it allows for more accurate representation on where parts of the models are, stuff like that. So on the right hand side of your keyboard, hopefully you've got one, you've got the number pad. If you don't, you can change that in the user preferences, so you can use the numbers along the top to do stuff that way. But to change the perspective, what you want to do is you want to press the number 5 in the middle, and that changes it to orthodontic view. So you notice things kind of look a bit more flat now. This, to me, is the best way to use Blender, because it allows for the most accuracy with what you're doing. But if you want, you can use the orthodontic view instead. Here's the differences between the two. As you can see, one looks like it's drawn on a piece of paper in math class, and the other one looks like a 3D model. There's a couple of other hotkeys with the number pad that are quite useful as well. So you've got a load of different viewpoints in Blender. For example, number 1 puts you to the front, number 3 puts you to the side, number 7 puts you above, and number 9 puts you below. And if you want to do the invert of that, Control and 1 puts you behind it, Control and 3 puts you to the other side, Control and 7, and then Control and 9 don't really do anything. They're not really that useful. So I think they're all the basic hotkeys we should be going through now, until we've actually started getting into the modelling stuff itself. Something else I like to do real quick, these little windows here, you can move them around, drag them and drop them. What I like to do is I like to extend this out and give that a bit more room, simply for the fact that it makes things a lot more easier when you're going through the whole model files, all the different meshes for the model. Um, and yeah, and that's it for that part. There's not really anything else you might want to do. I mean, you might want to make some extra windows, to which point what you'd do is these little 3 lines up here, what you'd want to do is you want to drag them. So say I could have 2 windows like that, and then this little box here, which is in the corner of every single one of these, except that one, oh no, it's at the top there. You have one in every single one, and what they do is they let you change the view that's in this box. So say I wanted another one of these, what I'd do is I'd click that, and I would go to the outline tool, what am I about, window, and then if you want to get rid of this, all you have to do is click these 3 lines here and drag across, and you'll see this little arrow pop up, and then it'll go like that, and it'll simply just fill it back in with this. If you go more advanced and start making several windows, let's make another one there. If you want to simply drag that across, it doesn't really work the same. What you'd have to do is you'd have to drag these up, and then drag that one back across, and you're back there. Now, with Blender, the only 2 real setups I have are the default view, as seen here, but I also use the UV editing view. This is for when I'm applying the textures to models in Blender so I can see how they look, stuff like that. Now you'll notice this has gone back to user perspective view as well, so whilst I'm over here I'll just click the number 5 to put that back to orthodontic view. And then this is your UV editing window. This is where you'll be able to see textures, input new ones, and it's also useful for if you're ever unwrapping the UV maps of models, such that you can pair them up with the actual textures itself. We won't be going into anything else with UV editing right now, we'll come back to it later. What we're going to do is we're going to set that back to default, and instead we're going to actually set up Blender so we can actually start importing and exporting some Jedi Academy models. So what you want to do is you want to go up to File and User Preferences, and when you're in User Preferences it'll probably start you up in Input or Interface, but you just want to click over to the Add-ons tab here, and you'll see you've got all categories, user categories, and import export. To make it easier, we'll just use the user one. You can use import export as well to find the actual thing, but we'll just be using user for now. So what you want to do is you want to go over to your internet browser, whatever that is, and you want to go to this link. I'll put the link in the description so you can find it a lot easier. But this is the Jedi Academy plugin suite for Blender 2.64 and above. So what you want to do is you want to download that. I'll just save it to my desktop. As you can see, I already saved it. Whoops. And then you want to go to Blender. Let's do that. And install from file. And then you go to desktop, wherever I put my desktop. Let's stretch this down. Desktop, and I saved it here. So then you just install from file, and then it'll come with a message like that at the top. And then it may or may not be ticked here. What you want to do? Oops, what did I do? Go away. You want to tick it to enable it, and then just save user settings, and then you can close that off. And then you'll notice when you come to File and Import, you'll have the extension for GLM as well as GLA for the Jedi Academy skeleton. But the only one we need to really focus on right now is the .glm. We can do the just importing of skeletons later when it comes to porting, but sometimes I like to just use the skeleton of existing models like Kyle Katarn. Simply for the fact that it's already set up with all the tags and stuff ready for the model. When you do the skeleton on its own, it doesn't actually have that. So let's, before I import anything, what I want to do is I want to remove this stuff off the screen. So what I usually do, just for quickness, is I press A and A again. What A does is it deselects everything or selects everything at once. Once I've selected everything, I'm just going to press X and click this, and it'll delete everything. So now I've got a fresh window ready to use. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to File, Import, and I'm going to go Model GLM, Desktop, and I already have a shortcut folder set up for it, but the way I'm going to go through it is my JK modeling, Jedi Academy, game data, base, models, players, and then as you can see I've got a whole bunch of models here. Some on default models from the actual base folder, some of stuff that I've downloaded and worked on myself. So you can see I've got quite a lot. You won't actually have as many as me, or you might do. I don't know what you do with your spare time, but you could do. Anyway, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to import the Kyle model by default, and the one you want to import is model.glm. You can have it load a different skin by default as well when you're putting it in, but I'll just have it load the default one right now. So you'll notice the .skin files you've got here, aside from the menu one. You can load blue or red by default, or you can just load the default one, to which point you just put blue, red or default, and then you go up here and you click this, and here is the model. Now this is just the I forgot the name of the view for this one, but to actually show the textures you can just press Alt and Z and it'll show the textures, and then doing it again brings that mode up. Pressing Z on its own brings up the wire view mode, and then Alt and Z you can just get back there. Pressing Z on its own just cycles between them two. So if you want to load the textures up, it's Alt and Z. So now we've got this up. You'll see here that this has been populated with this stuff now. What this is you've got these four model routes actually for Kyle. Model route 0 is when, I don't know, there's not many models in the game, so the game looks, pretty fresh and cool for a 2003 game or whatever. But then you've got stuff like model route 3, which is when the game's having a tough time loading stuff, so that's the low-res Kyle Katarn that you'd probably see from time to time when, I don't know, you're in a full server of 32 players. So for me personally, I wouldn't really have these extra model views, model routes, when I'm doing my whole porting work and whatnot, purely for the fact it takes extra time to work with them. So what I'll do is I'm going to click them and hold Shift to select them all, and press X here and just delete, and then you'll have the model up here. These are the model route 1, 2 and 3s that we don't need, because we're only going to be using model route 0. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to get wire view up, press B, and then I'm going to drag and select this area, and then something extra is I'm going to delete these tags as well by just pressing B and dragging, and then I'm going to press X and delete. And that's the quickest way to remove them extra model routes. So now you're left with this, just a standard Kyle Katarn. This is the highest resolution one out of the entire thing. Now here on the right hand side where my mouse is, this is the hierarchy for a model for Jedi Academy. You don't need to follow this hierarchy. If you wanted, you don't need all these different mesh parts that make up a model, like this part of the arm, the hand, the shoulder. They could all just be part of one mesh for the entire arm, or arms and torso, that's up to you. The way I like to work is I like to make individual mesh parts for the model, just so when it comes back to editing it, it's not as much of a pain. Except if you readjust in the pose, because then it can get quite annoying. But you won't really need to be doing that much, if at all, for that matter. But this is the hierarchy, so whenever we go to mod view and it tells us that the hierarchy is wrong and it needs to be remeshed, something like that, we can come back here, because this is what needs fixing. What will need fixing, if at all. Hopefully not. And they're the basics for viewing models in Blender, I think. Was there anything else? Oh, right, yes. Something else I like to look at when I have the models up in Blender. When I'm doing my work, sometimes you'll have the skeleton root here. This is the skeleton that does all the animations in Jedi Academy. And what I like to do with this is I like to go onto this tab and use X-ray mode, and you can include the names as well, because that can be useful for you later if you're doing this on your own. But most of the time I don't really need the names on it. But this basically allows you to see the skeleton through the model, so you can actually see the different parts of the skeleton, I guess, and where everything is. And then what it also allows you to do, a lot easier than before, is you can go down here and you can change the skeleton to pose mode. Before doing that, make sure you're actually selected onto the skeleton from either here or by right clicking it here, and come down here and select pose mode, and then that allows you to fiddle around with the animations in Blender. So say I could press R to rotate around the point of origin, and then it'll do that with the different parts that I've clicked on, just to see how all the different things work. Pelvis just moves the entire model. Just think of the pelvis as the origin point for the skeleton, I guess. But yeah, there are some other stuff you can do with the skeleton as well, like pressing G. I'm probably selecting the wrong part. You can press G and you can move stuff around like that instead, but that's probably not going to be as important. Something you can do with your left click on your mouse, you can move this little thing here, it's like the point of origin, but the rotation still only really rotate around that at the moment. What you can do once you've changed this is you can go down here and you can change the pivot point to the 3D cursor instead. So now when I rotate, it'll rotate around that point instead, instead of around the active element, which is what it was before. And then if you ever go too far off the screen, or it's too way out, so to speak, something you can do to recenter yourself is just press Shift and C, and it'll bring you back. So that's the basics of viewing the model in Blender, and I think that's pretty much everything I wanted to cover with this video. So what we're going to be doing with the next one is we're going to be doing a little bit of work on mixing and matching a couple of models together, which is basically what we call Frankensteining. So what we'll be doing is we'll be using the Calcatar model, and we'll be taking the head off, and we'll just be putting it onto another model instead. And I'll be showing you how all that works, and then how to have it animate as well. One thing that I forgot to mention, I said I was going to do it earlier, but then it just completely crossed my mind. We're going to be quickly going through the base files for Jedi Academy, just so we can have it set up so we can import and export models properly along with the skeleton. So what you want to do is you want to go to your PC, local disk, program files, x86, or wherever you've got it installed. So it's your Jedi Academy folder where all your files are. You want to go in here and then to game data and then to base, and then in your assets 1 PK3 you want to open that up. I just use WinRAR to do it because it's the easiest way really. You can use Packscape if you want to, which I'll also leave a link to in the description, but for this we'll just be using WinRAR because that's just what I do. So you go into the models folder and then players, and then the only things you really need are the underscore humanoid folder and then whatever models that you're working on. The underscore humanoid is what contains the skeleton file for Jedi Academy. All the other humanoids aren't really important. So you can if you wanted to you could extract everything. And then what you want to do is you want to have a folder set up basically exactly like that. So I've got a JK modelling folder with all these different files in it, and then here I've got Jedi Academy, and then game data, then base. But inside base, I've got all these files instead, folders I mean, instead of the actual PK3s. So I'll do a models folder, and then players, and then I'll be putting them in here. So what I'd do is just simply drag it over and replace. Although you probably wouldn't be replacing because you've probably not got this. But this is how to set up the model files ready for Blender, so you can start doing stuff with Jedi Academy. Because if you don't, and you're just trying to put in the model itself without the skeleton, you probably get a couple of errors. Same for if you're trying to import a Jedi Outcast model alongside it. The easiest way to do that is either have a second folder for Jedi Outcast with your Jedi Outcast files from the Assets1 PK3, or you can just take out the skeleton, which is in the humanoid folder, and then just have two humanoid folders, and then whichever one you want to use at the time. Say I don't want to use the Jedi Academy one, I'll just rename that so it doesn't load it by default, and then I'd rename the Jedi Outcast one to just be _humanoid, and then Blender would load that one by default when loading up the model files that you need. But yeah, I just had to go through that really quick, just so we didn't have to go over it again in a different video. But thanks for watching, I'll see you later.